In this episode, we move into a topic that helps make security much more practical, because it shifts the conversation from hoping controls work to checking whether they actually do. Security testing tools and techniques give organizations a way to look for weaknesses, confirm assumptions, and understand how well their systems stand up to mistakes, misuse, and attack. For someone studying for the ISACA Certified Information Systems Auditor (CISA) certification, this subject matters because auditors are often expected to evaluate whether testing is happening in a meaningful way and whether the results are being used to improve risk management. For a beginner, the most important starting point is recognizing that security testing is not about breaking things for fun or proving people wrong, but about learning where exposure exists before a real attacker turns that exposure into damage. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. At a high level, security testing means examining systems, applications, devices, and processes to identify weaknesses that could affect confidentiality, integrity, or availability. Some testing looks for known technical flaws, while some testing checks whether configurations follow expected standards, and other forms look at how security controls behave under realistic conditions. What ties all of these activities together is the idea of evidence, because a mature organization does not want to guess about risk when it can gather facts. Security testing helps turn assumptions into observations, and those observations help leaders decide where to focus time, money, and corrective effort. This is especially important because modern environments are too large and too complex for anyone to rely on casual inspection or personal confidence alone. One of the first distinctions to understand is the difference between a tool and a technique, because the title includes both for a reason. A tool is the instrument used to collect information, perform analysis, or simulate certain actions, while a technique is the method or approach that guides how that instrument is used. A vulnerability scanner, for example, is a tool, but authenticated scanning, targeted validation, and scheduled retesting are techniques that shape how useful the scanner becomes. In the same way, a person using the same tool poorly may produce shallow or misleading results, while a thoughtful approach can create clear findings and actionable insight. This matters to CISA learners because an audit rarely ends with asking whether a tool exists. The more meaningful question is whether the testing approach is appropriate, controlled, and aligned with business risk. A helpful way to organize the topic is to think about security testing in layers. Some testing is broad and discovery-focused, meaning it tries to identify what systems are present and what obvious weaknesses may exist. Some testing is deeper and more targeted, focusing on specific assets such as web applications, cloud configurations, databases, endpoints, or network boundaries. Other testing is confirmatory, which means it is designed to verify whether a control that should be working is actually doing what management expects. There is also an important human layer, because some testing considers how users behave, how administrators manage privilege, and whether teams respond properly when something suspicious occurs. When you view testing this way, it becomes easier to see that no single tool can answer every security question, which is why organizations build testing programs instead of relying on one product or one report. Vulnerability scanning is one of the most common and widely discussed forms of security testing, and it often provides the first broad view of technical weakness across an environment. A vulnerability scanner compares observed system details against known issues, such as missing patches, outdated software versions, unsafe configurations, or exposed services. This kind of tool is valuable because it can cover large numbers of systems quickly and repeat the same checks consistently, which makes it useful for regular monitoring and trend analysis. At the same time, scanning results must be interpreted carefully because a scanner may report weaknesses that are not actually exploitable in the way they first appear, or it may miss business context that changes the severity of a finding. For beginners, the key lesson is that scanning is extremely useful, but it is part of the testing picture rather than the entire picture. Configuration assessment tools are another important part of security testing because many real-world weaknesses come from how systems are set up rather than from dramatic software flaws. A secure product can become risky if remote access is too open, logging is disabled, encryption is weak, default settings remain in place, or administrative privileges are broader than necessary. Configuration testing helps compare actual settings against internal standards, accepted baselines, or external requirements so that teams can see whether practice matches policy. This matters because organizations often assume their standards are being followed when in reality small exceptions, rushed deployments, and forgotten systems create silent drift over time. For an auditor, this type of testing supports questions about governance and control effectiveness because it reveals whether approved security expectations are consistently translated into real operating conditions. Network-focused testing tools also play a major role, especially when an organization wants to understand visibility, exposure, and pathways between systems. These tools may help identify active hosts, open ports, available services, trust relationships, and network routes that could allow movement from one part of the environment to another. The value here is not just in finding a device, but in understanding what that device may reveal about the wider environment and whether segmentation is truly working the way leaders believe it is. If a highly sensitive system can be reached from places it should not be reachable from, that is a testing result with real business importance. Beginners should remember that networks are not just cables and traffic, they are the connective tissue of the enterprise, and testing them helps show whether boundaries exist in practice or only on diagrams. Application security testing introduces another layer because software can behave safely at the infrastructure level while still exposing the organization through logic flaws, poor input handling, broken authorization, or weak session management. Security testing for applications can be done in different ways, including examining the software from the outside while it is running, reviewing code for risky patterns, or analyzing how data moves through the application during use. These approaches help reveal weaknesses that a general system scanner may never notice, especially when the problem is tied to business logic rather than a missing patch. This is important in modern environments because applications often handle customer data, financial records, operational workflows, and access decisions. From a CISA perspective, the broader lesson is that testing should match where risk lives, and in many organizations, a large share of risk now lives inside the behavior of applications and connected services. Penetration testing is often the most misunderstood technique in this entire area, partly because it sounds dramatic and partly because popular culture portrays it as a kind of contest. In reality, penetration testing is a controlled exercise in which testers attempt to demonstrate how weaknesses can be used under defined rules and within an approved scope. The goal is not to cause damage or embarrass operations teams, but to provide evidence about how an attacker might chain small issues together into a meaningful compromise. This makes penetration testing different from basic scanning because it emphasizes validation, exploitation within limits, and realistic attack paths rather than simple weakness identification. For beginners, the key point is that penetration testing can provide powerful insight, but it is not always needed for every system at every moment, and it works best when it builds on good foundational testing rather than trying to replace it. Another valuable category includes testing related to credentials, identity, and access control, because many incidents begin with misuse of accounts rather than with exotic technical exploits. Security teams may use tools and techniques to identify weak passwords, excessive privileges, stale accounts, missing separation of duties, or access patterns that do not match job needs. The reason this matters so much is that even a well-patched system can be placed at risk if the wrong people have the wrong access for too long. Identity testing also connects strongly to audit concerns because authorization is both a technical matter and a governance matter, shaped by approvals, role design, reviews, and timely removal of access when circumstances change. For a new learner, this area is a reminder that security testing is not only about machines. It is also about how trust is granted, maintained, and corrected. It is also important to understand the difference between automated testing and human-led analysis, because both are necessary and each has strengths and limitations. Automated tools are excellent for scale, consistency, repeatability, and speed, which is why organizations rely on them for routine scanning, baseline comparisons, and continuous checks across large environments. Human analysis adds judgment, curiosity, business context, and the ability to notice relationships that a tool may not understand on its own. A scanner might tell you that a service is exposed, but a skilled reviewer can recognize that the service is exposed on a system holding especially sensitive data and that the risk is higher because of surrounding control gaps. Strong security testing programs combine automation and human expertise instead of treating them as competitors, and that balanced view is essential for auditors who need to judge whether testing outputs are actually leading to informed decisions. No discussion of testing would be complete without addressing false positives, false negatives, and the challenge of interpreting results responsibly. A false positive occurs when a test reports a problem that is not truly present or not meaningful in the way it seems at first glance. A false negative is the opposite problem, where a real weakness exists but the test does not detect it, which can create a dangerous sense of confidence. These limitations do not make tools useless. They simply remind us that results must be reviewed, validated, prioritized, and understood within the context of the environment. For CISA students, this is a valuable lesson because audit work depends heavily on evidence quality, and evidence that is misunderstood can lead to the wrong conclusions just as easily as evidence that is never collected at all. Scope, authorization, and timing are also central to effective security testing, even though they are sometimes treated as administrative details. Testing must be clearly approved, carefully bounded, and scheduled in a way that reduces unnecessary disruption to operations while still producing meaningful findings. If the scope is too narrow, important risk may be missed, but if it is too loose, the activity may create confusion, performance issues, or even accidental business interruption. Good testing, therefore, requires coordination between technical teams, business owners, security personnel, and sometimes legal or compliance stakeholders so that everyone understands the purpose and boundaries of the activity. This reinforces a major theme in cybersecurity. Even technically strong practices can fail if governance, communication, and accountability are weak. The value of security testing is realized only when the results lead to action, because testing that produces reports without remediation is little more than an administrative ritual. Findings need to be ranked, assigned, tracked, corrected, and retested so that the organization knows whether exposure has actually been reduced. Over time, results can also reveal useful patterns, such as recurring configuration mistakes, business units with slower remediation habits, or technology areas where risk is consistently underestimated. That trend view is powerful for leadership because it helps move the conversation beyond one-time findings and toward continuous improvement. An auditor looking at security testing should therefore care not only about whether a scan ran or a test occurred, but whether the organization learned from the results and strengthened its control environment as a consequence. When you step back and connect everything together, security testing tools and techniques become much easier to understand as part of a larger control system. Tools help collect and analyze evidence. Techniques determine how those tools are applied, and both are most useful when they are aligned with risk, scope, governance, and follow-through. Some methods are broad and automated. Some are narrow and investigative, and some are designed to validate whether a determined attacker could turn a weakness into a business problem. For a beginner preparing for CISA, the most important takeaway is that effective security testing is not about chasing flashy activity or generating long lists of technical findings. It is about creating disciplined visibility into whether security controls are actually working, where exposure is growing, and how the organization can improve before a real threat has the chance to make those weaknesses painfully clear.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.